Alright, now this next question, I want the surface, the wind direction on both sides of the front for a couple reasons. One, I want you to recognize that those winds are going to vary somewhat, and we can see how near the 500 millibar level, a lot of times these winds will dictate the directional movement of the surface storm system. Now, not always, and frequently not, I guess I can say, but I want you to tie those together. So, what are the wind directions ahead and on both sides of the front? Okay, I don't have a chart that's going to show exactly this, but we know the location. Okay, I want to go back to the latest surface analysis. Here's our fronts. Okay, we can do a mental picture of this. We probably won't even address this one. We're going to pay attention to this cold front, this warm, and this occluded front right here. So with that in mind, I'm going to go to my winds and temperatures aloft, and we're going to check out the 750 millibar level. It's approximately 10,000 feet. You can use the 9 or 12,000 foot winds. That's fine. And let's look at just the wind speed. Okay. Now we can also see the front from this area too. You've obviously got the low pressure system. All these winds rotating counterclockwise until you get on this side. You can see the definition of where that low pressure system is and things wrapping around, and then there's probably a high out over the Atlantic here where things are rotating clockwise. So let's come into this. Okay, behind the front, the winds are, let's see, at 10,000 feet, the 750 millibar level, we're about 30 knots out of the west for the most part, and that's a pretty average condition. Now as that front wraps around this side and we get further down here, we've got some stronger winds. Okay, but we're gonna give our wind level at 750 as about 30 knots out of the west. Okay, now we go over the 500 millibar level. It's pumping up to 18,000 feet. Very similar wind pattern, but they're obviously stronger. I'm looking at this same area where this front is, behind the cold front, and we better put behind the cold front, and ahead of, I'm getting ahead of myself here, ahead of front, we're at, let's go back here to our 9,000. Ahead of this front, we're more southwesterly, and they are stronger. We're about 50 knots, in fact. Okay. At the 500 millibar, we'll address the surface in a second because I want to show you a couple different tools here. At the 500 millibar, which is 18,000 feet, similar type winds, so I'm just going to copy and paste this. But I'm going to change the winds. They're really, what we're looking at along most of this front is more like 50, you know, probably an average. Some of them are going 60, 70, 80. We've even got some really strong stuff here at 18,000 feet, 100 knots, but generally speaking, we're about 70 knots here, and we're kind of west southwest, and ahead of the front we don't have, you'll notice, as dramatic of a change. They're still westerly until you get right up by this low pressure system. Okay, so ahead of the front we're about 50 knots, not as strong. Southwest varying to south and we go at 50 knots. Okay, this is sufficient. I can tell that you're paying attention to what's going on here. Let's go to the surface now. A couple ways you can check these. We can go to the surface winds here, and that's fine. This is really where you're going to see the most dramatic difference. We could tell if we went straight to this chart that there's a cold front right here extending from this low pressure. Out ahead of the front, winds are out of the south, southeast. Okay, as soon as we hit that front, the winds are swapping out of the southwest, and well behind the front, you're moving west to northwest. I mean, and you can see this with frontal passage. It's not going to be much different. Despite the front, it'll be the varying how strong the winds are. So ahead of the front, out of south, southwest, or excuse me, south southeast, we're looking at about 30 knots. Okay, if we look at these barbs, we got 10, 20, 30, 10 knots for each barb. That's pretty average. Behind excuse me, behind the front, we are at, you know, really not as strong. It's looking, on average, we got 10, there's 15, there's a 20, you know, 20, 30. So behind the front, we're out of west, northwest at 30. Okay, that's it. All right, we'll pause this session. When we move to the next one, we'll talk about the temperatures and visibility and some other things, and then I'll address the other place you can look at winds on here. But if you were to type out those questions yourself, the amount of time this takes, I realize sometimes it's frustrating, but if you can go to the right site and keep your information brief and to the point, you're going to be just fine. So we'll pause there and we'll give more instruction here in next segment.